What's up, Samurai? We are back with some more Trove, and today we're going to be talking about the most efficient way of getting crystal gear. This will apply to those of you players on console when this update goes live, because you have to consider that the Gearcrafters update, it completely changes everything. It makes end game gear like crystal gear and stuff like that so much more accessible for you guys. It's actually crazy. Now, for somebody like me who's already at the end game, all we really have to grind is Crystal 5, and even then we only really grind Crystal 5 for the sake of it, because there's not really any reason for us to be any stronger, you know what I mean? So I'm just trying to get the point across that just because Crystal 5 is in the game does not necessarily mean that you should chase after it, especially considering how difficult it is to obtain. Now, I'm gonna kind of go into a little bit of the gear crafting, but most of all, I'm going to be talking about the new gear drops. We're gonna save the Gear Crafters tutorial for when I actually have the profession maxed out, which I'm almost there. Almost. I'll probably be able to get it done in the next live stream in an hour or two of just solid grinding. But right now, like, I gotta get this video out to you guys, and then I'm going over to the families for Easter stuff, which, happy Easter, gamers. So essentially what happened with this update is the Gearcrafter ended up getting added into the game, and this is a method that you can end up slowly crafting gear. So in order to end up actually getting any of the crystal gear that we're going to end up talking about today, you essentially have to have this profession maxed out, which is probably going to take you around, like, let's say maybe 6 or 7 hours, depending. Honestly speaking, it's fairly quick to end up getting through this. Most of all, it's going to end up being related to the Gearcrafter boxes, because the huge bottleneck is the block element, which is the resource that you can get from loot collecting gear, which means that you need to grind gear as efficiently as possible. But then there's also going to end up being these boxes, which will drop gear, block element, and eventually crystal gear. So the most efficient way of actually grinding both of those at the moment is going to end up being U6. Now, granted, this is probably going to end up being patched out at one point, so take it with a grain of salt if you see that it's different. The reason why is because in U6, it's not as laggy, just because everyone's grinding the end game right now. It's not as laggy. You can get a significant amount of gear drops because suddenly the rarity of the gear doesn't matter as much. I mean, it still does, but not that much. And then on top of that, there's actually a bug in the game right now that was in the test server as well, where you get a guaranteed amount of these boxes per dungeon in U6. Now, the way that these boxes are mechanically supposed to work is there's supposed to be a chance of getting them from U1 up to U9, where it is suddenly a guarantee from each dungeon, with I think U10 and U11 being 2 boxes per dungeon. Now, if I recall, U6 has either it's a 1 guarantee or it's a 2 guarantee right now. Again, it's a bug that was on the test server that is still in the game for whatever reason. And so that's what a lot of people are saying is the most efficient way of getting through the gear crafting, just because you're getting tons and tons of gear, and thus you're getting lots of the block element. Now, the important thing to keep in mind is that where you are actually going to be getting crystal gear from now on is going to be out of these boxes, but the only way that you can get crystal gear in the loot table of these boxes is by having the profession maxed out. You don't need to have the terminus by any means. This thing is just for crafting, so this makes it so that Crystal 2 is obtainable through gear crafting, Crystal 3, Crystal 4 with a rare chance of Crystal 5. Now, the only reason I'm bringing up the terminus is because we're going to look at the power rank requirement here, so you can see that you have to not only have this, but you have to have 15k power rank requirement in order to end up actually crafting C4. Now, the reason why that's important is because with these boxes, you also have a power rank requirement. Now, I don't know what the requirement is for the PR for Crystal 1, 2, 3, and 4. If we go off of the terminus, it's going to be 5k PR for C2, C3 at 10k, C4 at 15k. But if I had to guess, I'd say it's probably at 10k intervals. So you probably have to be at like maybe 35k PR in order to get C4 out of these boxes once you have the profession maxed out. Because in order to get Crystal 5, you need to have 45k PR, which is brutal because it means that you basically have to have maxed out pretty much everything. To just get that 45k, you gotta have a lot of dragons, lots of gear and stuff like that. Anyways, the main reason why I'm talking about these gear boxes and so on is because while you can, yes, you can still get crystal gear as a drop from dungeons, but unfortunately, you're gonna scrap it. Lots of you have been reporting how you're getting like, oh, I got a Crystal 5, and then I end up explaining, the lack of value to Crystal 5 dropped gear, and suddenly you're like, oh, so should I scrap it? In which case, yes and no. If you need the PR boost, use the gear temporarily. But if you're trying to invest in the gear and actually level it up and get it more powerful, then you want to scrap it, because the defining difference for the crystal gear as it goes higher and higher in value, and more particularly at Crystal 5, is it costs a ridiculous amount of nitro and forge fragments in order to upgrade, right? Now, nitro is definitely a lot cheaper on the market now that we've got a new method of grinding it, which is kill Leviathans, you get a box, and then you basically craft that box 10 times every day, and you just get like a bunch of nitro passively. You can keep crafting it up more than 10 times a day, but by that point it's not profitable because the crafting cost increases every time. We'll talk about that in our video, but I'm just saying that nitro is a lot easier to come by. Forge fragments, not as much, but whatever. So the main reason why gear crafting and these boxes are the most cost efficient, with these boxes being the top, is because when you craft gear, it has a chance of being at 2 stars or higher. Maybe not higher, but 2 star at the minimum, as far as the gear level is concerned, right? So that's saving you 2 full star levels with that gear, which is a significant amount of nitro and forge fragments that you're saving. The difference being is that these boxes don't cost you anything in order to craft them in the first place, because you got to consider that if you craft it, yes, it's going to end up being at a higher base value, but you're going to have to drain a lot of resources and a lot of block element and stuff like that. Now, granted, if you are just like completely at the end game and, you know, by the time this update's been out for like a month or two, we're going to be swimming in the block element. And so it's definitely going to, I think that the gear crafting is going to end up coming into its own later on. Like it's a big time sink, because a lot of the newer resources that are going to take us a certain amount of time in order to end up stockpiling. But it means that the gear crafting will end up being kind of the long-term goal, because later on you'll be able to get, you know, Crystal 4 and maybe even Crystal 5 on all of your classes. Not that it's something that I'm personally aiming for. I'd rather just get one good set of physical, one good set of magical, right? Now, that said, the boxes themselves, again, will end up dropping gear at 2 star, which means this is the most efficient way of getting crystal gear. I've heard from reports from a lot of you guys that max out the profession, that you've gotten plenty of Crystal 3 and Crystal 4. The other ramification that this update has had is it means that crystalline cores are so much easier to obtain now. It's almost like the Cosmic Dragon was, its crafting recipe was ready for this update. Almost like the Cosmic Dragon should have been added with this update. Yeah, but overall, I think that pretty much covers everything. So basically what I'm saying is that the different methods that you can end up grinding both these and gear is, once the U6 bug gets resolved, it's going to be U10 Sundered Uplands 5-star dungeons, with you also having the option of doing it in U11. Because if you do a U11 5-star dungeon in Sundered Uplands, you do obviously have a chance of getting Crystal 5, because Crystal 5 can only drop from U11. But the most efficient method of farming both gear and these boxes is going to end up being 5-star Sundered Uplands dungeons eventually. Now, the reason for that is because, of course, with the 5-star dungeon, you get gear out of all the chests, which they did actually nerf in a hotfix for some stupid reason, but they didn't nerf the boxes. So it still is the most efficient. once the U6 bug has been taken care of. But yeah, that's going to do it for me, everybody. Ladies and gentlemen, I appreciate you beyond words for watching these videos. Thank you so much. Smash like stuff for more. Buy the merch you want to support the channel. Oh, hi, Mark. And have yourselves a wonderful day and a happy Easter.